Hello, today we are going to make the smallest compost pile in the world. We're going to use just two ingredients, one green and one brown. Don't worry if you can't get the green ingredient in this video, I will give you an alternative. First we need to collect the ingredients, get them home, prepare them, mix them and chop them. Don't worry if you haven't got a shredder or a lawnmower, again I will give you an alternative. Come on, Mol. Come on. Good girl. Give this a few weeks. Laying out here. You get the wind, you get the sun, you get the rain. Be as clean as a whistle. Okay. Then hopefully, if we get a few dry days before we chop it, hopefully this seaweed will be dry. And it'll chop better when it's dry than it does when it's wet. Come on, Mol. There's leaves. This is the seaweed. I've already given the seaweed the once over to make sure there's no stones in there. There is a video on my channel that warns you about the fact that there could be stones with the seaweed and actually attached to the seaweed, and it tells you what to do if that's the case. But this seaweed that I gathered is quite clean. I've checked it, as I say, there are no stones in it. And I've set the lawnmower blades high. Okay, you must set your blades high. Okay, so what we should have in the back of the lawnmower now is a mixture of chopped up seaweed and leaves. The seaweed being the green of the mix and the leaves being the brown of the mix. Let's see what we've got. Okay, so this is the chopped up leaves and seaweed. You can hardly tell the difference. It does such a good job. Look at that. Thanks for sticking it out. Not much further to go now until we build the smallest compost pile in the world. But just before we do that, well, by the way, I've got some of the mix in the wheelbarrow now, so we're ready to go. This is one of those 10-inch buckets, 10-inch pots that I like to grow potatoes and carrots and leeks and celery in. Beetroot, beans, any veg that I can manage to squeeze in here, I squeeze in and grow it. And at the end of the growing season, if you're like me, if you're growing in buckets like this, or pots or containers, you do that and you harvest the veg, or you cut the veg out, whatever. But you finish up with some spent compost in your wheelbarrow or on the ground, and you're a bit stuck for ideas. And usually, to keep the place tidy, you pop it back in the pot, or you pop it back in the bucket or the container. But then what do you do with it? Bear in mind that this could be at the end of the summer months, beginning of autumn, which it is now, and you're not going to be growing anything else. So you've got your soil in this pot, you've already used it once. What are you going to do with it? You're going to put it to one side. You're just going to put it to one side till next year. But hey, we need to do some work on this soil. If we expect to use this soil again next year, we need to do some work on it. Now, I know through experience, through emptying these pots, that there's lots of worms will be living in there. There's microorganisms that will be living in there. We've just disturbed them, we've just emptied them all out, then we throw them back in again. And then we're going to stand this to one side through autumn and winter, which is roughly 6 months, and they're going to try and survive in there. The food source would be dead vegetation. We've removed most of it, but there will be some dead roots and stuff in there that they can survive on. But we want these guys to survive. We want these guys to survive in this soil until we need to use it again next spring. So we need to give them a helping hand. That's what this stuff's going to do. Okay, now then, there was two things I promised you at the beginning of this video. two alternatives that I would show you. Okay, so this is the alternative to the lawnmower and shredder. If you haven't got a lawnmower and a shredder, but you've got access to seaweed and you go and get a bucket full of seaweed, this is what to do. Garden shears. Couldn't be simpler, could it? Chopped seaweed, and if you've mixed your leaves in there, you've got your mix. A chopped mix of seaweed and leaves, a chopped mix of green and brown, the seaweed being the green, the leaves being the brown. How's that? Now the other thing I promised you was to tell you that if one of these ingredients you couldn't get, there was something else you could use in its place. That ingredient's seaweed, because not everybody lives near the coast. Grass. That will be the green of the mix. The leaves will be the brown of the mix. And the best way, if you're going to use this green, if you're going to use grass, is actually, if you've got leaves on your lawn, put the mower across the top, collect the leaves and the grass at the same time, and they will become a chopped mix, a green and brown chopped mix that you can use to build the smallest compost pile in the world. Hey, easy peasy lemon squeezy. Okay, so why do we want to do this? Why are we bothering with this? Well, if you had a big backyard or an allotment or a large garden, you perhaps wouldn't, would you? But if you're growing things in pots or buckets or containers, if they're on your patio close to your property, they might even be on your balcony or on your paths. You don't want a stinking pile of compost. That's the last thing you want. Okay, this green and brown, there will be a carbon nitrogen ratio, one bringing carbon to the mix, one bringing nitrogen to the mix. For the purpose of this video, it doesn't really matter which is which, and neither does the ratio. Why does the ratio not matter? Because we're not hot composting, and because this pile is going to be so small, that ratio will not have any effect on the ability of this pile to put some goodness into this soil that you're going to use next year. Now if you had a compost heap, the traditional compost heap, a deep compost pile, it would generate heat, it would go all through the year, you'd keep adding to it, you'd possibly cover it over with a tarp, okay, and if you got your carbon nitrogen ratio mixed up, if you didn't get it right, it could turn into a slimy mass. It could stink, it could attract rats and mice and vermin and flies. Come on, we're gardening at home here. That's not going to happen, is it? It's not going to happen for me, it ain't going to happen for you if you're gardening at home. This is what you're going to be doing, trust me. Okay, now I know this stuff works because I chop and drop it on a raised bed to overwinter. And I don't know if you've seen my latest video, best onions I've ever grown. There was a mix of this stood on that raised bed and overwintered. So it was on there for 6 months. Now then, ask any gardener that composts, where is the most fertile soil in your garden? And they'll tell you it's at the bottom of the compost pile. It's the soil that the compost pile sits on. Well, we're going to sit a compost pile on this. So this soil will be the most fertile soil you've got in your garden. Let me just get another pot with some soil in. Okay, so this is our pot. There's the soil. This would have grown potatoes or leeks or carrots. I've already told you that. This will have grown a crop this year. And we ain't going to use that for 6 months. It'll be full of life. We want to sustain that life. We want that life to work for us. While we're indoors during the cold winter months, we want this to be getting better. And it can do. And it will do if you follow this simple advice. Okay, now we're not going to cover this over. There will be no smell, there'll be no slime, there'll be no flies, there'll be no rats, there'll be no vermin, there'll be no mice. Just good wholesome compost on there being attacked by the elements from above and the worms and the microorganisms from below, and by the time 6 months is up you won't even know this stuff has been on there. It'll have all disappeared, if not all of it, most of it. Anybody that does composting will tell you that. You can have a compost pile as big as you like, but in so many months' time it'll be half as big because it breaks down. And when this breaks down, where do you think it's going? There's only one place it can go, in that soil. This is it. Smallest compost pile in the world. There you go. How easy was that? How easy was that? Now this will stand in the garden now for 6 months, and I've got another 40 or 50 pots just like it that'll be covered with compost just like this, small compost piles. This will feed everything that's in that pot, and the elements will help to break it down and push it further and further into that pot, so that by the spring of next year this will be ready to go. And basically what we do then in the spring of next year, we turn this pot out completely, mix it all up, make sure there's a good mix, probably add some fertilizer, bang it in the pot, plant something, bish bash bosh. How good is that? You're going to do this, I know you are. And if you haven't got the seaweed to go with the leaves, grass. If you haven't got the lawnmower or the shredder to chop everything up, garden shears. You've no excuses. You've got to give this a shot. You've got to. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm out of puff. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, give me a thumbs up. Send me some comments, please communicate. And yeah, give this a go. Please give this a go. Okay, this is Homegrown Veg, signing out.